Chapter 17. Give me a B, give me an I, give me an R, give me a D. October 2002. I've maintained a good relationship with Slats in the years since the case ended, and he's recently likened my demeanor and intensity during the Black Biscuit to that of a fight-trained pit bull with him as my handler, holding the leash as best he could. Any good dog handler knows that even when holding back, you have to let the dog get an occasional taste of blood in order to keep him fierce. He did a good job. I wanted to bite all the time. I wanted suspects. I wanted all of the angels to be prosecutable. I wanted better evidence against the people we already had. I wanted new evidence against those we didn't. We'd gotten a lot of information that could be used against Smitty for both the Laughlin riot and a potential RICO charge. I'd continue to work on him, but I had to spread my wings and branch out. It was time to head south, to Phoenix, to Mesa. There were bigger hunting grounds. Mesa claimed at least 20 full patches with a large contingent of prospects and hang-arounds, and things were going to heat up. We expected to have women pushed on us more often than they had in Bullhead. Timmy prepped a female Phoenix cop for action while I waited for Slats to get JJ. Progress on the front was slow. JJ's ASAC wanted her to attend an advanced undercover class before he released her. This was fine, except that the class started in January. We couldn't wait that long. A return to Phoenix also meant we had to take a good look at Rudy, who was in the wind and useless. Every now and then, we'd hear about him running around Apache Junction with Iwana, strung out or on the hustle. For Rudy, the worst had happened. His demons had resunk their addicted, criminal talons deep in the thick of his back. His nature had beaten his better intentions. Slats was figuring out what to do with Rudy, whether to cut him loose and pick him up later or force the issue and sweep him away. It came down to whether or not we thought Rudy was dangerous to us. We weren't convinced either way, not yet. Timmy, Pops, and I went to Mesa to support a party on the 17th at Spirits Lounge. We got the standard welcome, a booming intro over the PA by Good Time Charlie the DJ, with a special floors for us solos, who were by then a name brand local club. That night, Bad Bob offered Timmy a pretty blonde with hoop earrings, saying she liked to blow out of town bikers. Timmy said that sounded great but declined, telling Bob he had a woman and that she'd be coming out to support the party on the 24th. Bob let up. They'd fed her Boilermakers, tequila, and beer and decided that I should have the pleasure of taking her home. She tottered up to me and did a little curtsy. I stood with Bad Bob, who was accompanied by a young attractive blonde wearing glasses and overalls, and who was completely inked from her neck down. The curtsying woman was cute. I never caught her name, but I'll never forget what she did next. She took 3 steps back, shook off the cloud of alcohol that surrounded her, and began to kick and pump her fist in the air. Give me a B, give me an I, give me an R, give me a D. What does it spell? Bird, bird, that's my man. If he can't do me, no one can. She was actually pretty good. She jumped high, her toes were always pointed, and her smile was the quality of being attached, like she was a Miss Potato Head toy. Sino Cal and Nuzo nearly fell down laughing. Bad Bob grabbed the tattooed blonde's slender waist and squeezed, toasting the cheerleader with his beer bottle. I smiled and shook my head. I took the cheerleader on. I let her sit on my lap and hang off my arms and shoulders. At one point, I gave her a piggyback ride around the pool table. We all went back to the clubhouse and horsed around some more. The angels fed her more booze. ATF had recently discovered the secret that Mesa Mike, the informant, being run out of LA, had been keeping. He admitted and alleged that he and 2 of his Mesa brothers had beaten Cynthia Garcia on the clubhouse floor and killed her in the desert. We were at the clubhouse for 15 minutes before I realized what I'd potentially done. By allowing this cheerleader to come back to the clubhouse, I delivered an arguably innocent, if foolish woman into the mouth of the lion. The beast hadn't bitten yet, but there was nothing saying he wouldn't. I had to get both of us out of there, pronto. I grabbed her and went up to Timmy, Nuzo, Ostianak, Bad Bob, and his skinny blonde. The cheerleader tugged at my arm. I said, I gotta roll this honey out of here right now. She's gonna be no good to me in 30 minutes. Bob said, shit, Bird, stick around. Looks like the little girl wants to have some fun. The party's just getting started. We had to go. If she passed out, I'd have been responsible for facilitating the gangbang. We turned to leave and everyone gave us a heavy goodbye. Outside, I squeezed her for her home address, put her on my bike and took off. She barely held on. I took it slow. When we got to her house, she was asleep on the back of the bike. I hauled her off, fished her keys from her pocket, walked her upstairs and dumped her onto her bed. She was very unconscious. My mind raced. Was this chick a setup? Who knew what else besides liquor was in her system? My paranoia said roofies. I looked at her lying in bed. She looked dead, but her chest rose and fell shallowly. I left the room convinced I was in a bad spot, that the angels had followed me to make sure I'd screw this woman and leave. Therefore, I couldn't leave. I had to maintain my cover and play my role. I'd been in similar situations and they raced through my mind. One stuck out. I was working the Iron Cross MC in Georgia with Vince Safalu. Vince was one of the few UCs who outshone me in terms of performance and aggression. I learned a lot from him. In addition to being a hell of a UC, he's got a PhD in psychology, which I can only assume has helped him in his undercover work a great deal. The leader of the Iron Cross MC was a guy named Little Rat. He was being badmouthed by a local nobody who owned a tattoo shop. Little Rat wanted us to work over this rival and tell him to shut up. We knew it was a mud check, a test of will to make sure we didn't drop our mud in serious situations. And we knew we all had to do it in order to maintain our cover. To the guy's shop, it was dusk, and the guy's Little Rat sent to follow us did a poor job of concealing it. We'd have to have big words with the guy, maybe knock him down and rough him up a little. We pulled into the parking lot. The guy's shop looked shut down. Vince walked up to the door and pounded it with the fleshy side of his fist. He dragged hard on a cigarette before pulling it out of his mouth to shout out, "Open up!" No answer. Another drag as he pounded some more. He yelled, "Open up! Get out here and take your ass whooping, you chicken shit cocksucker." Vince put on a good show for Little Rat's spies. Eyes appeared through some blinds. A voice said, "Give me a minute." Vince turned to me and winked. The door opened, and before either of us could react, the tap man had lowered a double-barreled crackback shotgun in Vince's chest. I thought, shit. I also thought, shotguns throw a wide pattern. I better step to the side. I did. I put my hand on my pistol, but didn't draw. Later on, Vince told me all he could do was think that he should have been a fireman. Tapman was clearly scared and tweaking. All three of us were in a jam. Vince was dead, and so was Tapman, as I was going to kill him right before I stooped to the blasted body of a dear friend in a futile attempt to save his life. Also, the case was as dead as Vince. Then Vince did one of those things only Vince would do. He took a final drag on his smoke and let the hot, pitch butt drop to the ground. He grabbed the bad end of the shotgun, removed it from his chest, and guided it to his forehead, keeping his hands on the barrel. As he did this, he turned to me slightly and winked again. The message was clear. If I die tonight, it won't be like a punk. Tell my sons I died like a man, not like some loser or a drug addict to spare his life. The tap man didn't know what to think. Truthfully, neither did I. Vince spoke clearly and calmly. Few things. 1. If you're gonna shoot someone, shoot them in the head. 2. You put a gun on me, you better intend to use it. 3. Fuck you. Do it now or I'm going to beat you with your own gun and fuck you in the ass over the hood of my car. As Vince finished his words, he quickly jacked the gun to the shoulder of the tap man. Then he yanked it back. In less than a second, Vince had reversed roles. He was holding the gun and Tap Man was looking for a place to hide. I thought, how did he do that? Vince broke open the breech and pulled the shells out, putting them in a pocket. Then he did something else only Vince would do. He didn't beat the guy. He handed him back the gun, still open, and said, "You can't badmouth Little Rat anymore. He's my friend and I won't have it. The next time you open your mouth and Little Rat comes out, you better start with, 'I'm sorry' or 'forgive me.' You got a pass tonight, but you only get one." With that, he turned and left. I followed him like a shocked puppy dog. The tap man just stood there, trembling lightly. He was probably pissing himself. The guys Little Rat had sent to see how we handled ourselves had already scurried off to report what they had just witnessed. This episode ran through my mind as I wandered through the cheerleader's apartment. I knew that mud checks came in many forms, and then, when given one should always, at a minimum, give the impression that one has followed through. The angel still made me insecure. Was this a test because I'd been avoiding women? Was it Cal, Nick, and Kevin's joke on me? Was she the old lady of an enemy and I was a pawn in some kind of payback game? I wandered into her kitchen, not turning on any lights. I phoned Tom Teabag Mangan, a task force member and close friend who was on the cover team that night, and told him the situation. He broke off from the team covering Mesa and cruised over to the cheerleaders' neighborhood. He looked around and gave the all clear. He asked how she was doing. I said she looked fine, Teabag asked. The girl got lucky tonight, huh? Yeah, real lucky. Instead of one of those assholes fucking her, she gets me pretending to fuck her. Teabag laughed a little. I told him I was going to hang around for a while just in case. He said okay and hung up. I opened the fridge, made myself a turkey sandwich with some slightly moldy cheese and a Brand X ketchup, and settled down in the living room in the dark. I ate quietly, and when I finished, I closed my eyes. I could see myself in the witness box, questions being fired at me. I'd remind the court that undercover operators like me were consistently thrust into situations that forced us to question our individual ethics and morality, and that in this instance, I'd made a poor and spot-on decision that I tried to fix with limited success. But I'd also remind the court that I didn't have sex with the cheerleader, and that would be the God's honest truth. I knew I'd be held accountable, but being second-guessed and spoken poorly of is a cost of doing business as an undercover. That night, Bad Bob handed Timmy written invitations to the remaining October parties. We rolled up to the Mesa clubhouse around 9:30 on the 24th, as promised. Timmy brought his girlfriend, an undercover Phoenix Metro detective. There were guys there we'd seen and never seen. In addition to the Mesa regulars were John Joni Kalstedt, the Phoenix Charter P, George Joby Walters, the Skull Valley Angel, who was at Laughlin, and a couple dozen members sporting bottom rockers that read Alaska, New York, Connecticut, South Carolina, Colorado, and Belgium. There were California members from San Fernando, Dago, and Purdue, San Bernardino. There were also a few members from other Arizona support clubs. At least 9 of the men, not including us, were openly armed with pistols. One such person was Joby Walters. Bad Boy showed us around. We met everyone. At one point, I stood with Bad Bob, Bruno from the Spartans, and Dutchman Keith from the Lost Dutchman. We talked about nothing in particular when I noticed Bob staring at my chest. As good-naturedly as possible, I said, "Why you staring at my tits, Bob?" He barely giggled. Bruno and Keith waited for his reaction before doing the same. I just stood there. Bob said, "I noticed you got some new flash, JHAP. Jesus hates a pussy, the Solo Nomad's motto." "Well, I think you could use some more. I think you should sport a Hells Angels support tab like these guys." He pointed at Bruno and Keith, who both looked down at their cuts. You could have run a finger up their noses, they looked so gullible. I didn't smile. I said to Bob firmly but respectfully, "Can't do that, Bob. I'm a solo and I'll never sew another club's name onto my cut. It's a solo cut, you know what I mean? I mean, the cut wasn't mine, it was my club's. Just like an HA cut belonged to the Angels, not to the guy who wore it. I also meant I wasn't like Bruno or Keith. I wasn't going to roll over for the Angels like they did. It was ludicrous to suggest, but I was trying to cast the solos as the Hells Angels equals. I was also saying that I was loyal above all else, and, like an angel, I'd never substitute loyalty for my club for allegiance to another. I continued, "These guys, no disrespect or nothing," I nodded at them. "They chose to support you with those patches. Me, I support you with these." As I said that, I pulled back the front of my cut, revealing my ever-present Glock 19s. Bob smiled, and I did too. I looked at Bruno. He practically blushed. Keith didn't seem to mind, even though I'd punked him bad. Joby walked by as I finished saying this. He nodded in my direction. Apparently, he'd overheard everything and liked it. Good. A few minutes later, Bad Bob announced that we were all going to Spirits. We rolled. It was the largest group of Angels we'd ridden with. The Mesa guys rolled tight in the front, but down the line, things were looser. We, being non-Angels, rode at the back, which suited me fine. We blew traffic lights, ignored laws and courtesies like signaling, yielding, right of way, and roared into the parking lot as Spirits, 40 strong. It felt damn good. As we walked in, a South Carolina Angel said, "Damn, these Arizona brothers press it hard. Shit, I ride like old people fuck. Slow and sloppy. That gave me some comfort. I wasn't the only one who was scared of riding like Mesa. A VIP section was hastily cleared by prospects and bouncers, and free alcohol began to flow. Women popped like mushrooms. Linear Skinner's Freebird played over the system. This has been my song since junior high school, a song I took to heart for the first time I heard it. There are songs you respond to because they tell you something about yourself that you already know, but maybe are unable to articulate. And there are things you respond to because they help mold your image of yourself. Freebird was both. As practically everyone knows, the lyrics talk about the impossibility of a stable love between a woman and the Freebird, who is a restless, wandering soul. The restlessness is what always is spoken to me. It recalls my inability to reach any kind of lasting satisfaction and reaffirms in a cruel twist that I can only ever remind my failures and never my successes. Looking in on myself, especially since the case has ended, I regard this trait to be one of my weakest. The irony is that satisfaction is all you really want. This is where my restlessness comes from and where it turns into action, into wandering, into searching. More often than not, in the wrong places. I am an undercover cop after all. Therefore, I'm just like the guy in Freebird who cannot stay, who cannot change, and whose Lord knows he cannot change. Nothing changed at the bar either. It was the usual scene. We left around 11 and rode back to the clubhouse, bringing a cachet of women with us. The party never stopped. The jukebox was fired up and the sound system was turned to the front yard. I could only imagine what the neighbors thought. I went to take a piss and Joby, whom I was yet to formally meet, was standing at the urinal next to me. He nodded to me as we went about our business. He finished before me and went to the sink. Before I zipped up, I let a drop of piss hit each of my boots. When I turned to wash up, he was looking at me quizzically. He said, "You're a bird, right?" "Yup." "It's Joby." "Yeah." "That's right. What the fuck was that about?" "What?" "The boots. An old bull rider told me it was good luck." He smiled wide, his buck teeth shining. "I like that. Hasn't failed me yet." We stepped back into the party and went our separate ways. I stood around the yard with a dozen other guys and half as many women. The Mesa Clubhouse had a front house that was for members only. Occasionally, its door would swing wide open and one of us would get a glimpse inside. All we saw was more of the same. Joby came up to us. "Hey, Bird." "Hey, Joby." We shook hands. Timmy and Pops were with me. I introduced them. Joby said, "I heard a lot of good things about you guys. A lot of good things." I said, "Glad to hear it. It means the world to us that you guys think well of us." He nodded. I could see over Joby's shoulder a little commotion breaking out. A drunken woman in high-waisted, too tight, acid-washed jeans pestered two Mesa angels. Joby glanced over his shoulder and looked back at us. He said, "Smitty and Bob both spoke to me. Dennis too." Timmy said, "Cool. We love those guys." Pop said nothing. "It sounds like the feeling's mutual." Joby spoke with a quick, high plains twang, but it didn't change the feeling that he was a smooth customer. He sounded smart to boot. The women in acid-washed jeans had moved on to a group of angels standing next to us. She was begging for a bump of meth. Her voice was shrill and her words were pathetic. Bad Bob emerged from the front house, followed by a tattooed girl. His face pinched and red. As he walked by, he looked at me and spurted, "Shit, Bird." He sniffed hard and his eyes were tearing. The tattooed girl was laughing. Bob grabbed each of her butt cheeks. The acid-washed tweaker, instinctively aware of the proximity of some good crank, bagged more. Joby cringed, but others ignored her. He said, "The chief moved out of Kingman a few months ago. We need more numbers in that area." The chief, I assumed, referred to none other than Ralph Sonny Barger. I said, "Yeah, I've been hearing some shit about Mongols in Kingman." "Heard that too. Heard there's 4 or 5 of those motherfuckers around there." Timmy said, "Well, there shouldn't be." "Goddamn right," Joby spurted. He got angry just thinking about them. The tweaker squealed, "I need a rail. Who's got a rail?" Joby said, "I'll kill those motherfuckers on sight. I don't give a fuck. Courthouse steps are out in the desert. I see a Mongol bitch and I'm shooting her off her bike and selling it for scrap. I don't give a solid fuck." I believed him. The tweaker, failing with everyone, turned to us. Joby eyed her peripherally. She bent her knees slightly and bounced, bringing her hands together in a plea. Her face was red and tired looking. She had shopping bag eyes and rotten teeth. It looked like she'd been pretty before the crystal. Pops turned to go inside. I could tell he was disgusted. He'd seen this kind of woman one too many times. Timmy and I watched Joby. The women got out 2 words, I need. Then, in a fluid motion, Joby turned on her, unholstered a hip belt 380 semi-auto, and pushed it into her forehead. She stopped talking and went cross-eyed. Joby barked in a sudden deep tenor, "Bitch, I will kill you if you do not leave me and my brothers alone right now." The only sound was music. Time crept. Some nearby angels looked at Joby. Others didn't even bother. The woman had already ceased to exist for all of them. It was like Joby had drawn down on a ghost or a patch of sunlight in a living room. Joby was serious and, by the look of it, acquainted with homicide. The woman had to leave or he'd keep his promise. I took note of it. As cops, neither Timmy nor I could let this happen. I made a snap decision to grab Joby and stop him if necessary. I'd have to tell him she wasn't worth it, which she clearly wasn't. I hoped he'd have sense enough to hear my words and forgive me for the offense of touching a Hell's Angel without permission. Joby continued, "You're talking to a Hell's Angel, bitch. Lesson number 1, we don't give, we get. You ever ask me or my brothers for anything ever again," Joby pressed the gun harder into her forehead, "and you'll find out in a real bad way what happens." Luckily for us and the tweaker, another woman materialized, grabbed her arm and pulled her away. She disappeared and I never saw her again. The music hadn't stopped and everyone resumed whatever they were doing. The woman gone, Joby turned to us and holstered his gun. He said calmly, "Let me give you my cell. Next time you're up in Kingman Way, you give me a shout." We said we would. Joby left us. We stood around in the yard. A girl I hadn't noticed strutted out from the clubhouse. She was followed by 5 angels I couldn't ID. Bringing up the rear was Bad Bob, who wagged his tongue at us. He pumped his fists in the air, pulling that imaginary train whistle. That night's gangbang was on. We left not too long after that.